My name is Matthew Fuentes. I'm the CNM Veteran Resource Center Program Manager. Brandon Lopez will be presenting with me on a segment of this. Uh, we are going to be talking about the Veteran Resource Center and the schools certifying or giving a overview of the Veteran Resource Center and school certifying program. And maybe, okay, that works. The first thing I want to do is kind of talk about the evolution of veteran services at CNM. And this is important because it really shows how things change, times change, and what we're kind of capable of doing over time with these programs. The Veteran Resource Center was established in 2016. Prior to that, we had our school certifying officials were part of financial aid. And then we had a vet success on campus program, but that was only for veterans with disabilities that were going through the VRNE program, the Veteran Readiness. Well, it's used to be VOC Rehab through the VA, and now it's called the Veteran Readiness and Education Program. In 2016, we identified the need, or the school identified the need for a specific veteran resource center. And so we established a Veteran Resource Center, but we still had those two other programs and they were separate. Since then, the Vet Success on campus has moved their office over to UNM campus, UNM main campus, but we still have access to that service as we need. Excuse me, I had a cough for like last 3 months. The Veteran School Certifying Office under financial aid merged with the Veteran Resource Center in 2019, right before that one happy event in 2020 that disrupted everything. The events of 2020 aggressively encouraged the development of remote accessible services. In other words, we had to figure out real quick, just like the whole rest of the world, how to do all of our stuff online. We effectively created a virtual Veteran Resource Center where our community could access our services from wherever they were in the world. Since returning to in-person, we are still utilizing that platform, or those platforms that we embraced. And we found kind of that we aren't now limited to geography, right? If we have service members that were stationed in Kirtland that were taking classes at CNM, they can still get services if they're deployed. If they're deployed overseas or if they're stationed anywhere else in the world. And so that's a pretty awesome capability that we developed out of necessity. But then now we have access to. Excuse me. It's effective October 21. The Veteran Services became part of the Division of Student Life and Dean of Students. So basically, there's a realignment, and that happened college-wide. Where now the VRC and the school certifying officials are effectively one unit. And so that has created its own benefits and its own challenges. And then currently we're exploring methods to enhance services to all CNM campuses. And this is, me trying to get my way in the world, as well as challenge population groups within the military affiliated community or military connected community. So at this point, I want to hand it over to Brandon to talk about the Veteran Resource Center, since that is now his baby.
All right, thank you. So I, on top of doing outreach events and other stuff like that, also manage the front of the house operations, and kind of want to give you guys a glimpse of what that looks like on a day-to-day basis, as our military affiliated community are coming in those doors, or through our front door. Basically, our first interaction, we want to start building that rapport with that veteran student just to see, kind of get a feel out for what the needs are for that specific individual. So building that rapport as they come into the front door is very crucial, and um, getting that first impression of what that student's actually coming for. So within doing that, we're able to explain veterans and GI Bill benefits to them. Some are different, and just with that initial engagement, we're able to determine which benefit they're most likely eligible for, whether it's a dependent coming in. We know that there's a couple of options for them. If they have a transfer of entitlement, then it's different chapter benefit that they are eligible to use as well. So we're able to sit down with them, explain to them how their GI Bill benefits work, as far as what other basically, so like if it's for instance, post 9/11 GI Bill, how they get a monthly housing stipend based off of the number of credit hours they're taking, book stipend that they receive as well, plus their tuition gets paid for. So we're able to, with that communication with that student, determine which resources are best suited for them or which benefits are best suited. With that, we also assist them with their VA education benefits applications. So we'll sit them down on one of our computers here in-house. If they don't have already a certificate of eligibility in hand, we can help them through the process through the VA website to apply for those educational benefits, as well as get them started with their process or their journey with CNM. Which kind of leads into the next one. We assist with CNM application and registration navigation. Typically, I've been with CNM for 5 years. I worked at the contact center and at the one stop. So I'm pretty well versed on the processes and procedures, and am able to walk our students through the application and different barriers that they may face, such as if they're a new student coming in. I already know what holds are going to be on their account. It's the new student orientation, as well as having to meet with an academic advisor. So able to guide them in that right direction after the CNM application process and all that good stuff. Also with the registration navigation, when they come back from our academic advisors, help them to register for their classes, where their classes are going to be at, explain to them on top of them registering for classes, how that looks with their GI Bill. So I'll use post 9/11 GI Bill again as an example. They need to at least have one class in person in order to receive their full allowance for housing. So if the student comes in and is just slated to take all online classes, we're able to navigate that and find them at least one in-person class without that being a burden for them. On top of that, they are also eligible for other types of benefits such as financial aid and different scholarships that CNM has to offer. And a lot of veterans that are coming in on our doors do not know that they have that option of doing financial aid. They feel like they're kind of double dipping, but it's not. It's not double dipping, and that's how we have to explain it. So with that, explain the financial aid and how financial aid works as well, because for some of these guys that are coming in, don't really know a whole lot about how school works or how financial aid works or anything like that. So having to explain that to them and sit them down, and financial aid's a weird thing where they're going 2 years in the past off their income from 2 years ago, when they just got out of the military and are not working right now, or they just quit their job to focus on full-time students. So I'm able to help them with submitting their financial aid application, but also setting them up for what's called an income adjustment. So setting them up for that income adjustment so they get the max award to them for any assistance. And Matt always says that school should be hard because the subject should be hard that they're learning, not because that they're struggling for cash or to make ends meet while they're going to school. So totally agree with that and running with that as well. Requesting transfer credits for previous experience. A lot of our service members don't know as well that some of their military training translates to college credits. So what we do in that same process of everything is we'll jump onto the joint service transcript website, help them submit the joint service transcripts over to our grad and eval team to be evaluated. And you know, students that come in will end up getting a handful of credits for some of the stuff that they did during their time in service. Next, we got SEEK, Community Financial Resources, Housing, Food Assistance, and Book Loan Programs. So we work, and this all ties back into that first initial contact, engaging what the needs are of that veteran student. So we see students that come in that are really struggling for housing or are struggling with food assistance, which CNM offers a food pantry every Wednesday and Thursday. Wednesdays at the main campus, Thursdays at the South Valley and West Side campus. So we're able to help them with that, along with our community partners as well. So we have, I would say, a vast array of different outside resources that we can refer that student to, such as a Veteran Integration Center, Goodwill, the Vet Center for counseling type stuff, which is the next one, referral to Veterans Counseling and Services. We do have our wellness CNM folks as well to lean on when we do have a student that is needing those services as well. And on top of that, we also plan some holiday events for our military connected community as well. Every year we do what we call a Secret Santa, and we last year had 57 kids that we shopped for and were able to get presents for last year. So that's in a nutshell kind of what a typical day is when a student comes into our office and what we provide to them.
Found it. And then, so Brandon talked a little bit about the Secret Santa. We do student events throughout the year, and as Brandon gets better at these events, I'll be throwing more at him, which is one of the best parts of my job. We do a lunch, learn, and earn financial literacy seminar 2 every term. And along with that is a scholarship that the students can take advantage of one time. And what we find is that scholarship is very critical early in their experience. And so we'll have students that are just getting started. The GI Bill and all of the VA programs work really well once they get started. The problem is a lot of times students are kind of struggling when they first get started. And so that's right when their GI Bill doesn't quite work the way it's supposed to, when there might be a delay in payments or an unexpected expense. And so a little bit of money in their pocket through that scholarship is exceedingly helpful right at the right time. We also do events for Memorial Week and Veterans Week. We found that when we just did a single event for Memorial Day or Veterans Day, it wasn't really reaching the right community. And so trying to keep the focus on the students, we expanded our events around these 2 holidays throughout the week. And so we do just smaller activities throughout the week, and then we collaborate with partners within CNM and outside of CNM to do an awful lot of outreach and support activities for our veteran community. Just last month, actually no, just this month, Brandon collaborated with our wellness CNM team to do a movie screening for PTSD awareness. And so we're constantly trying to make sure that we're engaging the military connected community, and in as many different ways as we can. So now let's talk some detail. So the CNM school certifying officials, their role is to make sure that the students get paid. We have last year we certified close to 600 GI Bill students. Excuse me. And that process is exceedingly detailed, and is not a one and done kind of process. We certified the Chapter 31 veteran readiness and employment, and those are our veterans that have a disability rating, and then post 9/11 GI Bill, of course. But we also certify Chapter 35, which is Survivors and Dependents Education Assistance Program, which is for children of veterans that are 100% disabled or are Gold Star families, children and spouses, excuse me, of service members who died in combat. Over the past 2 to 3 years, we've seen an increase in Gold Star members, and or Gold Star family members, and that population, even though it's very tiny, is entitled to very specific things, even outside of their veteran or VA benefits. But we also look at or we also support the Montgomery GI Bill active duty and the Montgomery GI Bill select reserves, Chapter 30 and Chapter 1606. The Those two chapters, it's constantly being talked about that the VA is phasing them out. We're not seeing that, and we kind of don't want to see that. The Montgomery GI Bill is generally looked at as the worst option. We find, though, that in specific situations, especially where the school has a much lower tuition cost and the veteran is entitled to other scholarships that pay tuition, the Montgomery GI Bill ends up being a much better deal, especially the active duty Montgomery GI Bill ends up being a better deal. And so that's why we want to build that rapport with the veteran, with the community as soon as they start engaging with CNM. We want to be one of the first places, the VRC, we want to be one of the first places that veteran speaks with, because once they've applied for their VA benefits, if they apply for post 9/11 and they were eligible for Montgomery GI Bill, they can't go back. They can, if they're eligible for both and they apply for Montgomery GI Bill, then they can, in the future, transfer over to post 9/11. But it's frustrating when students are a term or two, sometimes four, into their associate's program and realize that they could have been using the other one and have been getting better served by it, right? The post 9/11 pays for tuition. Well, if the student is eligible for opportunity scholarship or any other scholarships that are tuition only, they will automatically get the opportunity scholarship. Well, so then the VA won't, the VA doesn't give the student that extra money. It just goes back to the VA. And so, especially when students have longer term education plans, if they're going to go to CNM for their associates and then go to UNM for their bachelor's or further, we really, really want to make sure that they're getting their needs met in the right way. So those are and then the Veteran Rapid Retraining Assistance Program is a program that the VA implemented after COVID. They also implemented a very similar program after the global financial crisis in 2007, 2008. And basically, it's for veterans that don't have any other benefits that have lost their job because of global events. So we were able to put through several students on that BRAP program with varying levels of success. It's complicated and was kind of difficult to get stood up and running, but it did help out the folks that needed it the most. Excuse me. The New Mexico Veteran Scholarship programs are run through the Department of Veteran Services. There's the Vietnam Veteran Scholarship and the Wartime Veteran Scholarship, and those are tuition-based scholarships that any veteran that is either Vietnam era or has a campaign medal. For the most part, that means that they deployed in support of contingency operations and are New Mexico residents for 10 years can apply for those scholarships. And it doesn't matter what level their education is. And so we've seen students use the wartime scholarship for master's programs. And it ends up being a very good system. Now we don't necessarily have a mandate to for our school certifying officials to manage that, but the veterans are coming here anyways, so we support them in that. So who are we, or who we are? Our community, we have an average of 1,300 military connected students enrolling or registering for classes at CNM per term. And so a good chunk of those are veterans, but even among the veterans, depending on what benefits they are, whether they're reserve, National Guard, active duty, whether they're Marines, Air Force, everybody's got a little bit different background. But we also have military beneficiaries, so spouses and children of veterans, as well as active military. So active military being active duty, reserve, and National Guard that are currently serving. Our active military population has grown consistently term by term over the past 4 years. And so we want to make sure that we are taking care of them. So to meet that whole population group, we've got me, the Veteran Services Manager. Dee Bluehorse is our Veteran Program Specialist, and she is our SEO guru. We have our Veteran Resource Center Coordinator, Brendan. Alicia Brown, who came from UNM, is one of our school certifying officials. Joshua Garcia is a part-time SEO, but he's also our admin for the Dean of Students office. We have 12 VA work study employees and 2 CNM work study employees. Anybody that is working in higher ed that is not tapping into the VA work study program, give me a call. Let's talk about it. It used to be that the work study program was limited and based on how many GI Bill students were attending your school. That limit has been lifted and is no longer there, or at least is no longer being published. And so if you have the space, if you have the requirements, if you have the need for and interest for more VA work studies than you're currently using, or if you're not using any, ask. We tell our students, all of our students, on a regular basis, make them tell you no. When it comes to the VA, when it comes to CNM, when it comes to us, make us tell you no. Don't ever assume that the answer is no, right? And so if you think you're only eligible for 1 work study, ask for 5. The VA it will likely surprise you. And we can talk about that if anybody has questions or wants to reach out afterwards. I can talk about all of this stuff all day. I asked Martha how much time I had, um, because I could talk about all of these things for hours. Okay, and then of course, we're at CNN main campus, Student Service Center, room 207, and we're open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And now comes the fun part. Um, we can talk about, we can talk about data, we can talk about statistics, we can talk about programs, but what I really, really absolutely love sharing, and if I don't have time for all of my stories, Martha, please let me know. Give me the, give me the time, or just, cut my mic. Um, but I really want to share a couple of stories with y'all. The first, and I gave him little titles. My hero. We had a student come in 2 years ago, just after COVID, um, that was previously incarcerated, had gotten out, gotten a job, and then lost the job because of COVID. And so, because of that, we were able to get him into the VRAP program. He didn't have any other VA benefits. Like I said, he had just gotten out of prison, um, and was not connected at all with any of the VA support services. Um, we got him started. He wanted to get into bookkeeping, right, and accounting. His experience, though, was from before he was incarcerated, and I believe he was in prison for like 10 years. And prior to that, did not have access to the technology that CNM was now operating with. So he didn't know how to access his online classes. He didn't know how to access the online resources. He didn't know how to get into the programs that he was required to, just to attend class. And then once he was in class, he was having a very hard time because all of the books that he expected to have in person were all online. And he had made the decision, based on the money available to him, to buy a little laptop. Well, it was a very little laptop, and so trying to access what he needed to with the technology he had available was very, very difficult. Um, and he expressed a lot of frustration, and so we helped walk him through piece by piece all of the technology. Um, and he would leave our office, and Ian Scott was here at the time. Ian and I would have conversations uh, about how determined this individual was, and if either of us were in his shoes, we would probably quit by now. But he didn't. He stuck with the program. He ended up failing one class out of in that first term, and then over time was able to recover all of that. He finished the program, got his certificate, and comes to us and says, I don't have any VA benefits, but I'm I think I'm good at this. I think I'm good at this accounting stuff, and I think I'm good at being a student. And he was really excited because that had never been his reality in the past. And so we were able to get him set up with financial aid, with the Pell Grant, and get everything else set up in order for him just to function. And he reapplied or re-registered and continued. He's now working on his accounting associates. He's also and looking to go to UNM. He's also a work study in the VRC, and is doing exceptionally well. He took his life from effectively, no hope and no resources available to him, found a little string and just started pulling it and just kept pulling, and is making the most out of the situation available to him. And so, and his stubbornness, we are kind of a stubborn group at times, but also his humility and his willingness to just reach out and get the support that he needs, is now he's now in a position where he's able to do that for others as well, and have those tough conversations with others to get them the support that they need. And so that's my hero. But wait, there's more. About a year and a half ago, we had a family that had just moved here from San Diego. And the mom calls me and she's very upset about just trying to get the in-state tuition, trying to get everything settled out. And she had been working on this for the better part of a week. I said, come on into the office. She and her husband come into the office. She had been struggling with just getting answers online for the better part of a week. When she came in, we just started talking. And within probably about 20 minutes, we're able to resolve all of the issues that she had been struggling with, just talking to her face to face, and get her all of the issues squared away. In that conversation, this is why rapport and just developing those relationships and talking to people is so important. In that conversation, I learned that her husband, the service member, had just gotten his 100% disability rating. And so I looked at him and I said, do you know what that means? And he was like, well, yeah, I mean, I get paid by the VA now. I was like, no, man, with your 100% rating, all of your kids, and they had 2 sons and a daughter, all of your kids now have access to Chapter 35 benefits, as well as your wife. All of them have Chapter 35 benefits, and he has a 100% rating and is not considered unemployable. You have access to VRNE. They were coming in fully expecting to get all the paperwork squared away so that they could use the last little bit of his transferred entitlement of his post 9/11 for one daughter. In a 10-minute and 10-minute conversation, and then no 10 or 15 minutes in the office, they walked out of here with the knowledge that they needed for both of their sons to go to school, for the daughter to finish her degree, and the mom to continue on her education, shift degree plans a little bit, and get her bachelor's as well. And the dad, who's like, no, he gave up on school a long time ago. He wasn't going to do anything. The next term came in and was like, you know what? I'm getting a business degree, and get started on that as well. And so, and I share that story to highlight email is effective at answering the question. But oftentimes it's that conversation, that interaction, the having people out front that engage with the individuals and build that rapport that creates that community that gets to the more detail that is critical. This family's entire trajectory has changed because of that 20-30 minute conversation. And then the last story, if I still have time, full sprint on a broken hip. We had a student last year, who's still a student here. In fact, he just came to see me today. Came in, wanted to take 16, 20 hours of classes a term. And that stood out to me. And so I sat down and talked to him, just to get to know him and see what was going on. This student was an Albuquerque native, joined the Army, was a medic, got out after 4 years, and had, due to an injury to his hip. He was determined that he was going to be a surgeon, and he's going to come to CNM, get done with as fast as he could, and get through to UNM and get moving. In my conversations with him, I recognized that there was some unaddressed trauma, and he had planned to spend 20 years in the military and had his plans involuntarily changed because of his injuries, his physical injuries. He was keeping himself busy with school, using school, keeping himself occupied and focused on something for 18, 20 hours a day, maybe sleeping 4 hours a night, and then getting back at it. And I told him that is probably not going to work, and shared other resources, but he had no interest, wasn't for him, he wasn't interested in it at all. About 6 months into his educational journey, he comes into my office, and is a completely different person. He was unkempt, was exhausted, he was moving much slower, and just basically fell into a chair in my office. I said, "What's going on?" He said, everything was going great. I was getting straight A's. Everything was wonderful. I said, "Okay, and now they're not." He said, "No, no, they are not." And he was angry about it. I said, "What happened?" He said, I was in my psych class, and in the middle of lecture, it felt like the instructor opened up my head and was using my brain, my experience, as the example for the entire class. I said, "Well, that's kind of not that's really not good." Was he talking about you? And he said, "No, no, he wasn't talking about me at all. He was talking about symptoms of severe PTSD." I said, "So the instructor didn't point you out, or?" He's like, "No, that's just what it felt like." And then he broke down in my office. Um, we were able to get him the support resources that he needed very quickly. And he was able to engage with those support resources very quickly. Um, and that would not have happened if he didn't know where to go. And we've seen this in the past. If he didn't know where to go, if he didn't know that in this moment that of insight in this classroom, where he had to just get away from that classroom because what had been going on with him for the last 6, 8 months, even longer if you include his military time where he was going through getting involuntarily separated, that student would have likely just either dropped out of class. Well, not either, but he would have likely just dropped out of class, stopped attending CNM, incurred a major debt because of his GI Bill and other resources that were open to him, and spiraled out. But because we had built that rapport with him, because he knew where to come, where he knew where to get that support from, and that he would be heard here, he was able to come in. We were able to get him plugged in where he needed to get plugged in, and he was able to realign, stay in the class, and continue on with his education. He's still going to be a surgeon. He's still going to be going on to UNM, and I have encouraged him to look beyond that. He's a brilliant young man, and like the other stories, if we weren't set up the way that we are set up, we would likely not be able to provide that level of resource. So those are my stories. I'd like to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And turn it back over to Martha.
Yeah, thank you so much, Matthew and Brandon, for sharing about all of the resources you provide, and especially those particular examples of supporting students. Just as sort of like a quick wrap up, I can start off our section for questions. You described the importance of creating a community for these particular students by having specialized events, by making sure that you build that rapport with them so that they know that they can come to you with questions and for support. And so just as kind of a summary, how would you describe that veteran students are different, and what are suggestions for our community to better support those students?
So I'll say it in this way. Veterans are typically, and beneficiaries are typically going through a period of transition when they're in school. They are leaving a culture. They're leaving there's a book called Tribe that talks about the veteran culture. They're leaving a role that they often invest a lot of themselves into, right? Infantrymen identify as infantry. Marines identify as Marines, right? And so our veteran community is going through that transition, right? And often it's very isolating because even among the community, people are going through different things at different times, right? And so sometimes that transition is intentional, it's voluntary, it's planned, and there's not a lot of surprises. Oftentimes, however, even if it is intentional, even if it is planned, even if they signed up for 4 years, did 4 years, and got out, there are surprises along the way. And those surprises can be foundation altering to members of the community. The realization that, oh, I have PTSD, or oh, that knee injury that I got when I was in the Air Force security forces now is going to keep me from becoming a cop, right? And that happens even with beneficiaries. A lot of times, especially with our the beneficiaries of veterans that are using their benefits, they're using their benefits because their veteran either is 100% disabled, which dramatically impacts the family, right? Or was killed in combat. And so there's that transition. And sometimes that sneaks up on us. And so I love your question, but it's complicated. So if you think about it in that way, how do you help somebody who is in a new who has been introduced to a new culture, right? And you can think about it in that way, right? We all, we may share an understandable language commonality, but if you get four Marines sitting around a table and they start talking and they're going back and forth, you're probably not going to understand them, right? They're going to be throwing out unit names and where they were and this and that and the equipment and jobs and this and even for Army guys like myself, it's a different culture, right? And so if you think about it in that way, veterans are coming to the education environment, the higher ed environment, with a goal, but also stepping into a different culture, right? And at the same time, because we identify so closely with what we did, with what we experienced, sometimes we're a little hard-headed about facts, right? Or how things are portrayed. Personally, I find it a little difficult for people to tell me about the beginning of, all of the elements that went into the beginning of OIF, the Iraq conflict, because I was there, right? And because I was there, that gives me a specific perspective, right? I was on the ground when we went into Iraq, but that also limits my perspective because I was on the ground, right? And so it's easy for us to get into arguments about what we view as accurate, what we view as right, what we view as a certain way. And it's also easy to address that conflict in a conflict manner when it occurs. When we get reports of either from the veteran or from instructors or from staff of conflict with veterans, it's difficult for me to only see one side of it, right? I can see where the veteran's coming from, but I can also see where the faculty or the staff is coming from. And oftentimes it's a matter of just de-escalating and then coming to it from a professional perspective and keeping eyes on the mission. And that's something that, kind of eyes on the prize, mission focused is something that veterans and beneficiaries all can kind of relate to. We've all had to, deal with things we don't really want to deal with, but in order to meet our goals, we've had to make it happen. I hope that answers your question. It's complicated.
Yeah, no, I think that is a good point for everyone to really attach onto, that because there are so many nuanced layers of supporting these types of students, that it shows why it is very beneficial to have specific departments devoted to that and folks who have gone through that experience themselves to be able to support students. So I'd like to open it up to the rest of the group. What questions do folks have for either Matt or Brandon?
I had a question. So you mentioned that you had smaller veterans events throughout the week as opposed to just one big one on Veterans Day because it wasn't reaching the right audience. What kind of events did you host?
So this is kind of constantly an experimental thing. One of my favorite events that we do is a crafting and relaxing rock painting event, right? And so we'll just, outside the VRC, we'll just set up tables and student our friends down in student life and student activities will bring up paint and or the rope, the bracelet weaving materials, and we'll go gather rocks and we'll paint, fun messages about, veteran support on the rocks, and then we'll go place them in different places. And that just creates a space where anybody in the community, because we don't limit it to just the veterans, right? Anybody in the community can sit down and spend time having conversations. And so that's one of my favorites. We did a listening session. We've done, and so basically a listening session about, what is your experience as a veteran or beneficiary at CNM? What works, what doesn't? And I would have liked to have, more engagement, but the few folks that did come shared good and bad parts about being a veteran student at CNM that we don't necessarily see. We don't have visibility. The perception that, they're the old man in the classroom, right? Which, when we look at our demographics, isn't quite accurate. That, the average age and the other folks in the classroom, a solid chunk are non-traditional students, right? And so, when you're a 28-year-old veteran in a classroom, you're not surrounded by just 18-year-old high school graduates, right? Especially in the community college, like that's not happening. But it's easy to feel that isolation, right? And so, sorry, back to the events piece. For Memorial Week, we did a dedication where we invited our community members to submit pictures and stories of veterans that are military and veterans that were no longer with us. And that's been a very slow developing process. But then we do a dedication ceremony, and then we post those images along with information about New Mexico veterans around campus. Brandon, what other events?
So for Memorial Week, we also did like a snow cone social kind of. On the last day, it was on a Friday, so we did this Memorial Week events like the week before Memorial Day. So that Friday leading into Memorial Weekend, we did a snow cone social, which was kind of like a big thank you to everybody who participated. They were able to come up to our office up here. We had the snow cone machine from student activities and just enjoy each other's company and grab a snow cone. So we did little stuff like that, and kind of it right now in the works of planning Veterans Week right now. So I'm still thinking of different ideas of what we can get going for Veterans Week. That'll be well attended, hopefully, and something along the lines of a community. So our community partners, we want to host them here on campus as like a community outreach type deal and have a little cookout. So at the same time, we're, bringing those resources exterior to CNM on campus, and just, enjoying each other's company, learning about different resources, learning about what the VIC has to provide, or the Veteran Integration Center, what Goodwill has to provide, just different things like that. So starting to plan that for Veterans Week, even though it's in November, and starting to planning early on this one. So, but yeah, just small stuff like that, just throughout the week.